What if the first thing you thought you saw wasn't real? What if the person who claimed to find the bodies lied? Those are the questions now echoing across the tabloids, the police transcripts, and inside the minds of millions who once believed this case was open and shut. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Because Romy Reiner, daughter of famed director and actor Rob Reiner, has just changed her story. And in doing so, she's opened a door to something much darker than anyone expected. Let's rewind. Just days ago, America was stunned by a headline that seemed ripped straight out of a psychological thriller. Rob Reiner, 78, and his wife Michelle Singer Reiner, 70, were found brutally stabbed to death inside their luxurious $13.5 million Brentwood estate. An estate most people could only dream of. And who found them? According to every outlet, from CNN to TMZ, the answer was simple. Their daughter, Romy. The early story was chilling but straightforward. Romy, 27, reportedly came by the house after failed attempts to reach her parents by phone. She entered through the side gate. She found the door open, and then she saw the blood. She saw her mother on the marble floor near the kitchen island. She saw her father slumped near the base of the staircase. And she called 911, sobbing, breathless, hysterical. The dispatcher's voice, steady as always, tried to get information. But Romy's response was cryptic even then. There was someone here. I think they're gone. But I don't know. Police arrived within 7 minutes. Her brother, Nick Reiner, 32 years old, living in the guest house, was handcuffed by nightfall. 2 counts of first-degree murder. But now everything is unraveling. Because Romy has just admitted she wasn't the first to find the bodies. Someone else had already been there. Someone she claims fled when they heard her approaching. And when asked why she didn't say this earlier, she gave the answer that has everyone questioning everything. I panicked. I didn't want them to know what I saw. What did she see? Why did she lie? And who was that shadowy figure she now says vanished before the police came? Let's talk about why this story isn't just another Hollywood tragedy. Let's talk about why this changes everything. Because Romy's confession doesn't just cast doubt, it rewrites the timeline. It exposes gaps in surveillance. It raises the possibility of an accomplice or a completely different killer. It even suggests, horrifyingly, that someone stood over the bodies of Rob and Michelle Reiner, watched them die, and walked away. And the worst part? That person may still be out there. Now let's be clear. This isn't some murder mystery where the answer ties itself up neatly. This is real. Real blood. Real lives. Real lies. And if you think it ends with Nick Reiner sitting in jail, waiting for trial, you haven't been paying attention. Because unseen footage has surfaced. Footage that wasn't part of the official police report. Footage from a private security camera across the street. And that footage? It shows a figure, hooded, gloved, walking calmly out the side gate at 5:46 p.m. Exactly 7 minutes before Romy says she arrived. That wasn't Nick. So who was it? Let's not forget the detail almost every outlet glossed over. Romy initially told police that a dangerous family member should be considered a suspect. But she never named Nick. She never pointed fingers. She just hinted, a calculated silence. And now, with this bombshell revelation, we're forced to ask, was Romy covering for someone, or was she covering herself? The estate was locked down. No signs of forced entry. But one door, just one, was ajar. Not kicked in, not broken, just unlocked. A quiet entry, a quiet exit, a silent scream frozen on 2 faces. Then Romy steps in. The official narrative had her as the tragic daughter who stumbled upon the unimaginable, the grieving young woman. But she wasn't alone, was she? She says now she heard footsteps, fast, running through the yard. She caught a glimpse of someone turning a corner, just before they vanished beyond the hedge. Her quote, "I thought I imagined it, but now I know I didn't." So what changed? Why come forward now? Sources close to the case say Romy's conscience couldn't take it, that she saw the headlines turning Nick into a monster, that she knew something was missing from the story, and she finally had to speak. Others aren't so sure. Because here's something you might not know. Romy and Nick weren't close. Not anymore. In fact, they reportedly hadn't spoken in over 4 months leading up to the murders. There were arguments. Family group texts left on read. Tensions about the estate, money, legacy. and one fight that turned physical, allegedly, back in July. So if Romy knew Nick wasn't guilty, why not say so from the beginning? What was she afraid of? Or maybe, just maybe, she wasn't afraid. Maybe she was protecting someone else. Or something else. Because when police searched the house that night, they found something odd in the hallway near the back entrance. A single latex glove. No prints. No blood. Just placed. Deliberately. Left like a calling card. It didn't match any glove Nick owned. It didn't match anything in the house. And Romy? She claimed not to recognize it either. Until now. Now, she says she might have seen something like it before, on a person she refuses to name. Someone who visited the house once. Maybe twice. Someone who had an issue with her father. But she won't say more. She's scared. And now, so is everyone else. Because if Nick didn't do it alone, or didn't do it at all, that means the killer walked free that night. And still is. So what's next? In the chapters to come, we're going to unpack who really had motive to kill Rob and Michelle Reiner, the chilling inconsistencies in Nick's timeline, the unreleased footage that reveals a second figure, what Romy left out of her police statement, and why, the strange object found in Michelle's hand, and the voicemail Romy left for a friend just 20 minutes before she called 911. We'll follow the money, the jealousy, the secrets buried behind Brentwood walls. We'll hear from neighbors, insiders, even a former staff member who claims there were quiet threats made months before. And most importantly, we'll uncover what Romy meant when she said, "I didn't want them to know what I saw." Because that line, that one haunting sentence, may be the key to everything. Get ready, because what comes next will flip this case upside down. Why would someone lie about discovering their own parents' bodies? Especially when that person is their daughter. Especially when the nation is watching. Especially when silence could mean the difference between guilt and innocence. Romy Reiner didn't just hesitate. She told a version of events that's now unraveling, thread by thread. Let's go back to that night, Sunday. A warm evening in Brentwood. The sun dipped just below the trees, casting long, golden shadows over the $13.5 million estate that had been home to one of Hollywood's most influential families. According to the official reports at the time, Romy arrived around 5:53 p.m. She told dispatchers she hadn't heard from her mother all day, that it wasn't like Michelle to ignore multiple calls. She told them she let herself in through the side gate, and then she claimed she found her parents, lifeless and soaked in blood. But the real story, the one she's only now telling, starts 7 minutes earlier. Because according to new police documentation and Romy's own follow-up interview, there was someone else there. Someone she saw, just briefly. A figure, a shadow, a blur of movement turning the corner past the garden hedge. And here's the thing. She said nothing about that person for days. Not to police. Not to friends. Not even to the rest of her family. Why? That's what we're here to unravel. What could make a daughter lie about something this horrific? What was she afraid of? Or worse, what was she protecting? Because one thing is now disturbingly clear. Romy did not simply forget to mention the figure she saw running from her parents' home. This wasn't a slip-up. It was a deliberate omission. So let's pause for a second and ask the question the whole world should be asking. Was Romy afraid of telling the truth? Or afraid of what the truth might reveal about her? We have to look closer at the days, and even years, leading up to the murders. You see, on the surface, Romy was the golden child. Smart, soft-spoken, artistic. She graduated from Sarah Lawrence, just like her father wanted. She dabbled in directing. She moved in elite Hollywood circles. She played the role perfectly, until the cracks started to show. Those closest to her describe a strained dynamic at home. There were quiet disagreements about money, about legacy, about the way Rob Reiner managed the family, as though it were one of his film sets. Controlled, micromanaged, scripted. Sources say Romy had been trying to gain more independence, financially and creatively. But there was resistance, especially from Michelle, who allegedly held tight control over the family trust. Now, no one's saying that's enough to make someone lie in a murder case. But it does raise eyebrows. Because just 2 weeks before the murders, Romy and her mother had an argument, loud enough that a neighbor heard yelling from the upstairs bedroom window. The next day, Romy posted a cryptic message on her private Instagram account. Just 4 words. "I'll never be enough." It was deleted within the hour. But screenshots live forever. When asked about it later by investigators, Romy shrugged it off. She said it was about a breakup. But that's not what her best friend told reporters. She felt like a pawn in that house, the friend said. She felt like nothing she did mattered to them. And here's where things start to get murky. Because the same friend claimed that Romy told her, a full day before the murders, that she was planning to confront her parents. Not gently, not diplomatically. Burn it all down if I have to, Romy allegedly texted. Is that the language of a daughter simply seeking closure? Or of someone at the edge of something darker? Here's where the contradictions pile up. Romy said she arrived at 5:53 p.m., but one of the neighbors, an older woman across the street who walks her dog at the same time every day, told police she saw Romy's car parked near the gate at 5:40 p.m. That's 13 minutes before she called 911. So what was she doing in those missing 13 minutes? Romy says she was trying to process what she saw, that she froze, that she walked around in a daze before dialing for help. But police found something odd in the metadata of her phone. At 5:46 p.m., Romy opened her voice memo app. The file lasted just 17 seconds. It was deleted, but tech forensics recovered it. And what it captures is chilling, breathing, heavy, uneven. Then Romy whispering, "He was here. I swear I saw him. Oh my God. Oh my God." Then silence. And just like that, the clip ends. She knew someone else had been there, and she deleted the evidence. Now let's pause again. If you saw someone fleeing a crime scene, if you stumbled onto your parents' bodies, wouldn't your first instinct be to tell the police everything? Especially if it could help solve their murders? But Romy didn't do that. She deleted the clip. She lied about the timeline. She said nothing about the shadowy figure she clearly saw. That's not panic. That's a calculated decision. So what was she hiding? Let's zoom in on the quote that set everything ablaze. "I panicked. I didn't want them to know what I saw." That line has haunted every tabloid headline since the confession broke. It's been dissected on podcasts, blown up on social media. But no one has asked the obvious question. Who's the police? The press? The public? Or someone else entirely? One theory suggests Romy was protecting a person she recognized. Not a stranger. Not a random intruder. Someone close. Too close. Possibly another family member. You remember how Romy initially told police that a dangerous family member should be considered a suspect? She never said Nick. She never said a name. But she planted a seed. Now ask yourself, why would someone float that idea, but not follow through? Unless they were torn. Unless they knew more than they could say. Unless they were trying to point the finger, but only just enough to shift attention away from themselves. Could Romy have been scared that if she spoke the full truth, her own involvement, however innocent or indirect, would be revealed? Was she there earlier than she admitted? Did she see something she shouldn't have? Or did someone threaten her to keep quiet? Theories have flooded the internet. Some believe she was blackmailed. Others think she may have been involved in some kind of cover-up for a person she still loves or fears. But there's one detail that almost no one is talking about. The family dog, a German shepherd named Leo. Police logs mention that Leo was found in the backyard, pacing, covered in blood, not his own. But here's the catch. Leo wasn't barking when police arrived. No growling. No signs of distress. In fact, one officer noted that the dog seemed calm, alert, familiar. What if the killer wasn't a stranger? What if Leo knew them? And what if Romy knew that too? Let that sink in. The dog, the missing 13 minutes, the deleted voice memo, the vague warning about a dangerous family member. This isn't a mistake. This is a pattern. And it all leads to one question the police are quietly reinvestigating. What time did Romy really arrive at the estate? And who did she really see there? You might think this couldn't get any darker. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. What if the killer was still inside the house when Romy walked in? What if she wasn't the only living person standing over Rob and Michelle Reiner's lifeless bodies? That's the question investigators now find themselves revisiting after Romy's confession flipped the entire case on its head. Let's rewind to that exact moment again. The moment Romy opened the side gate and stepped into the Reiner estate. The moment she claims her phone dropped. The moment she looked up and saw movement. She didn't just see the aftermath. She saw someone. But here's what she didn't say back then. She saw that person inside the house. In the hallway. Not outside. Not jumping fences. Inside. And they weren't rushing. They weren't frantic. They were walking slowly, purposefully, like they belonged there. That's the part Romy admitted under pressure during a second interrogation, long after Nick had already been arrested. Let's break this down. When you think murder scene, you imagine chaos. You imagine shattered glass, kicked-in doors, a trail of destruction. But when police entered the Reiner estate, they found something very different. No broken locks. No sign of forced entry. Not even signs of a struggle in some parts of the house. Just silence. Too much silence. In fact, one of the responding officers, Sergeant LeMay, wrote in his notes, "The scene felt eerie, like the violence had been surgically contained." The only evidence of movement was a faint smear on the hallway wall, possibly from a gloved hand. That smear becomes important, because Romy says she saw someone walking through that hallway. Not running. Walking. That's a big detail. It suggests the person wasn't panicked, wasn't worried about being caught. Because maybe, just maybe, they didn't expect Romy to walk in. Or maybe, they wanted her to. And here's where it gets even more bizarre. Romy never gave a physical description. Not a height, not a build, not even a guess at gender. All she said was, "It looked like a shadow." And that might sound poetic, but it's also suspicious. Because in a home with massive windows, expensive recessed lighting, and motion-triggered hallway fixtures, shadows don't happen by accident. So the question is, was someone trying to avoid being seen? Or was someone wearing something designed to obscure them? Let's talk about the footage, not the security footage from the house. We'll get to that in a later chapter. I'm talking about the neighbor's driveway cam. That footage, recovered days later and leaked to the press, shows a blurred figure exiting the Reiner property at 5:46 p.m. Put up, carrying something in their left hand. Something that looks like a satchel or a rolled-up garment. But there's one blink and you'll miss it moment. The person turns their head briefly toward the camera. Not directly, but enough for a glimpse of the face. Or rather, what's covering the face? A mask, not a surgical one, not something for COVID. A full dark facial covering, like tactical gear, almost military grade. And that satchel? Police now believe it might have held more than just clothes. It could have contained the weapon. Because here's something they never told the public. The murder weapon has not been found. Despite intense forensic searches, including drain inspections, yard digs, and guest house sweeps, the knife, or knives, used in the brutal attack are still missing. Let that sink in. A double homicide. Both victims suffering multiple sharp force injuries. And no murder weapon. Which brings us back to the figure in the hallway. If Romy saw someone exiting calmly, without haste, that suggests two things. The killer had enough time to clean up. The killer had no fear of immediate discovery. That's not impulsive behavior. That's planned. So let's ask the hard question again. Did Romy know who it was? Some detectives think so. According to an internal memo obtained by an LA journalist, Romy hesitated during questioning. Not once, but 5 separate times. When asked directly if she recognized the figure, she answered with statements like, "It was just too fast. I didn't get a good look. It was more of a feeling than a sight. They had something over their face. It wasn't someone I expected to be there. Hold on. It wasn't someone I expected to be there." That's not how you describe a stranger. That's how you describe someone you know, in a context you don't expect. A friend, a cousin, an ex, a sibling. You don't use that sentence about a burglar. So here's where the real first witness theory gains traction. Because Romy might not have just witnessed someone leaving the scene. She may have interrupted them, and they let her live. Now pause. Think about that. If you're a killer and someone walks in, especially someone who knows you, what do? Run? Hide? Confront? Or do you already have a plan in place for this exact scenario? What if Romy was never meant to be there so soon? What if the killer thought they had another hour? And what if seeing her threw a wrench in everything? We don't know what words were exchanged, if any. We don't know if there was eye contact. We don't even know if the killer saw Romy. But Romy saw them, and that changes everything. Because if she saw someone exiting the hallway, she knows the exact direction they took. And that direction matters. Because it doesn't lead to the front gate. It doesn't lead to the main driveway. It leads to the side of the house, where the gardener's entrance is located. An entrance few people outside the family and staff would even know about. It's narrow, tucked between hedges, shielded from street view, and it's connected to a gate that's never used. Except that gate was found unlatched. And guess who knew that gate existed? Romy. Nick, and 3 other people, a former family assistant, a close family friend who often stayed in the guest house, and Rob Reiner's half-brother, Jake. Yes, Jake Reiner, an estranged sibling who had reportedly cut off contact with the family years ago, but was recently spotted in LA, staying with mutual friends in Malibu. Now, let's be clear. Jake has not been charged with anything. He hasn't even been named as a person of interest. But his name appears in an old police call log from 2018, when he allegedly got into a shouting match with Rob over the estate inheritance. Is it relevant now? Maybe, maybe not. But in a case full of shadows, every faint outline matters. And then there's the forensic evidence. That faint smear on the hallway wall, the one an officer described as possibly left by a gloved hand. Forensics found trace amounts of latex and a small fiber consistent with wool clothing. Not enough for a match, but enough to confirm what Romy implied. The person in the hallway was covered, head to toe. The killer came prepared. But here's the question you're probably screaming at the screen right now. Why would Romy lie about seeing them? Why hold this back? Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was guilt. Or maybe she was warned. One theory suggests the figure mouthed something to her, something like, "Don't," and she obeyed. Another theory claims she didn't speak up because she wasn't sure if what she saw was real. Imagine the trauma, the shock, walking into your childhood home, seeing blood, seeing your mother collapsed, unmoving, and then seeing a shadow. It could feel like a hallucination, like a dream, but then the memory hardens, becomes real, and it haunts you. Still, that doesn't explain the deleted voice memo, or the contradictory timeline, or why she told police no one else was there. Until now. Because the shadow in the hallway wasn't just a blur in her memory. It was real, deliberate, silent, and it may be the key to solving this case. In the next chapter, we'll turn the lens inward, to the guest house, to Nick Reiner's final hours before the arrest, to a night of conflicting stories, conflicting emotions, and one critical lie. Because the timeline doesn't add up, and the more we dig, the clearer it becomes. Someone's hiding the truth. If Nick Reiner really did it, why is his timeline full of holes? Why does his version of events sound so rehearsed, yet keeps contradicting hard evidence? It's the question burning through every investigator's report, every headline, and every whisper floating through Hollywood's tightest circles. Let's break it down. Because on paper, Nick Reiner, the troubled son, the recovering addict, the misunderstood shadow of a Hollywood legacy, had opportunity. He lived in the guest house, just 200 feet from where Rob and Michelle Reiner were stabbed to death. But did he have motive? Did he have time? And more importantly, did he have help? Let's rewind to that Sunday again. The day the Reiner household fell into silence and blood. Nick told police he was in his guest house all day, watching movies, texting friends, and just vibing out. He claims he never went inside the main house. Said he hadn't even spoken to his parents that day. But here's the first problem. Cell tower pings show movement. Nick's phone wasn't stationary in the guest house all afternoon. Between 4:28 p.m. and 4:44 p.m., his device pinged a tower closer to the northwest corner of the main property, right next to the kitchen entrance. Then it went dark. The phone was either turned off or placed in airplane mode until 6:12 p.m. And guess what time the murders are estimated to have occurred? Between 4:35 p.m. and 5:05 p.m. Let that sink in. Nick says he was watching The Usual Suspects, that he paused halfway through when his internet cut out. But there's no record of a streaming interruption, and no verification from his supposed text conversation with his friend, because those messages were sent at 3:10 p.m. and nothing afterward. He went radio silent right during the window of the crime. Now, maybe that's just coincidence. But let's talk about what was found inside his guest house. The first officer to enter Nick's space reported nothing immediately suspicious. No blood, no weapons, no clothes out of place. In fact, the officer wrote, it looked too clean, almost curated, like someone wiped it for show. That's when suspicion grew. And it grew deeper when forensics swabbed the guest house bathroom sink. Inside the drain, they found trace blood, not visible to the naked eye, but luminol lit it up. Initial DNA analysis couldn't determine a full profile. Too degraded, too mixed. But one sample was not inconsistent with Rob Reiner's blood type. And then there's the laundry. Detectives found a load still warm in the dryer. Mostly towels, a few socks, and one hoodie with the tag cut off. The hoodie? It had a faint red-brown smear on the inside hem, just small enough to miss if you weren't looking. Nick said it belonged to a friend, but that friend says they haven't seen Nick in over a month. So now we've got a strange hoodie, a wiped sink, a suspicious silence during the exact murder window, and a man who's been living with his parents after multiple rehab stints, therapy breakdowns, and a reportedly volatile relationship with his father. It doesn't look good, but here's where the contradictions start to twist. If Nick did it, why would he stay at the scene? Why not flee? Why not run the moment he knew the police were on their way? Instead, he stayed in the guest house, calm, detached. When officers arrived, he answered the door like nothing was wrong. Said he heard Romy screaming, but thought she was being dramatic. And here's what one officer said in his report. He looked more annoyed than alarmed, like we were interrupting his evening. But maybe that's just how Nick copes. He's always been the misunderstood one. In his 2016 memoir, Being Charlie, co-written with his father, Nick opens up about his battles with addiction. He describes feeling invisible, drowning in expectations, always being compared to a father he didn't ask for. There's one quote in the book that hits differently now. When you grow up in someone else's spotlight, your only options are to disappear or burn the house down. Is that what happened here? Did Nick finally snap? Was this a rage explosion years in the making? Or was he framed? Let's go deeper. There's a surveillance camera above the east side garage, meant to face the back garden. That camera recorded movement at 4:42 p.m. A figure, hooded, moving quickly from the kitchen patio toward the guest house area. But here's the problem. That figure's height doesn't match Nick's. Nick is 5 feet 9 inches. This person is estimated, based on frame analysis, to be closer to 6 feet 1 inch. And the gait? Not a match either. Nick walks with a slight slouch. Chiropractic records confirm it. The figure in the footage? Upright. Confident stride. So who was it? And more importantly, did Nick know they were there? Because even if he didn't swing the knife, even if he never stepped inside that house, he may still have played a role. Remember the gate we talked about last chapter? The side entrance, rarely used, found unlatched? Guess who used to sneak in that way to avoid his parents? Nick. He used it when he came back high, when he didn't want to face his mother's lectures, when he wanted to ghost through the estate, as one former housekeeper put it. So if someone else wanted to get in that way, and they needed Nick's help, he knew how. He knew when the cameras reset. He knew which sensors glitched. He knew that if he put his phone in airplane mode and stayed quiet, the system wouldn't trigger alerts. And then there's the elephant in the room. Money. Nick was reportedly on the verge of being cut off. Rob and Michelle were planning to restructure the estate's finances, putting Romy in charge of Nick's trust. The lawyer who helped draft the documents told police that Nick had been resistant and emotionally erratic during discussions. Michelle even wrote an email to her sister saying, "I'm worried about Nick. He thinks we're abandoning him, but we just want him to grow up." That email was sent 3 days before the murders. And then, silence. Now here's where things twist again. Nick's phone turned back on at 6:12 p.m., right as the first responders were finishing their sweep of the main house. He received a single text from an unknown number. Just 2 words. "You okay?" Police traced the number. It was a prepaid burner, registered to no name, no address. That phone has never been found, and Nick refuses to say who it belonged to. So again, if Nick didn't kill Rob and Michelle, who did? And why was Nick silent? Some believe he was in shock. Others think he was deliberately playing dumb. The psychiatrist who evaluated Nick after his arrest said he showed incongruent affect, but no clear signs of psychosis. Translation? He wasn't crazy. He was calculated. And yet, there's still something off. Nick asked one strange question during his police interview. Right at the end, he leaned forward and said, "Did you find the GoPro?" "The what?" Police were stunned. "There's no GoPro," the lead detective replied. Nick didn't clarify. He just leaned back and smiled. "What GoPro? Where? And what did it record?" "We still don't know." But the detective filed a request to search the backyard and guest house attic again, just in case. Because maybe, just maybe, Nick filmed something. Maybe he wanted something recorded. Or maybe he knew someone else did. You see where this is going? Nothing in this story is straightforward. Not Nick's timeline. Not his demeanor. Not his words. And certainly not his silence. The only thing we know for sure is this. The timeline doesn't add up. And when timelines don't make sense in a murder case, it means someone's lying. But what if Nick wasn't the only one with secrets? What if this was never about just him? Because in Michelle's private journal, yes, the one she kept hidden in a drawer in her writing room, she wrote something haunting just weeks before the murder. Nick is spiraling again, but it's not him I'm worried about. It's the one who hides behind him. Who is she talking about? That's what we explore next. Because her journal entries point to someone unexpected, someone close, someone quiet, someone with everything to gain. And what she wrote in the final days changes the entire story. What if Michelle Reiner saw it coming? Not just the tension, not just the unraveling family ties, but the murder itself. What if, in the quiet corners of her mind and the private pages of her journal, Michelle knew that someone close, was capable of doing the unthinkable? The discovery of Michelle's personal journal has sent a ripple of dread through an already twisted story, because it contains not just memories, but warnings, and not just suspicions, but names. Let's go back. 2 days after the murders, while investigators were combing through the main house for any overlooked evidence, they made a subtle but critical discovery. In the upstairs writing room, what Michelle affectionately called her quiet cave, there was a desk. Antique. Walnut. Locked. Inside the bottom drawer, hidden beneath stacks of manuscript pages and decades-old correspondence, was a small, black, leather-bound journal. The name Michelle wasn't on it. It had no dates, no cover. Just one thing written inside the front flap. If something happens to me, you'll know who. The room went still. The forensics tech handling the discovery reportedly stepped back and said, we've got something. And what they found inside was disturbing. The journal starts off innocuously. Reflective entries, daily musings, notes about scripts and gardening. But somewhere around 45 pages in, the tone shifts. The writing becomes more hurried, more erratic, darker. She starts talking about fear. She doesn't name a person directly at first, only using cryptic phrases like, "He's becoming unpredictable. The energy in the house changes when he's around. I don't trust the quiet anymore." And then the bombshell. In one entry dated roughly 3 weeks before her death, she writes, "Nick is in his head again. Aggressive. Isolating. But it's not him I'm scared of anymore. It's the one who stands behind him." That line. That one haunting sentence has become the epicenter of speculation. The one who stands behind him. Who is she referring to? Is it metaphorical? Symbolic? Or was Michelle pointing to someone real? Someone in their lives, manipulating Nick, influencing him, or worse, using him? The journal goes on. She details a strange visit one evening. Someone, again unnamed, came by the estate unannounced. She describes feeling on edge, watching them from the kitchen window as they stood in the garden, talking with Nick. She writes, "He looked like he was being lectured, or threatened. I couldn't tell, but his body language changed. He curled in on himself." This is huge, because it implies someone else was close enough to come and go from the house freely, without suspicion. Someone Michelle didn't confront directly, but feared. Someone who had access. Now remember, Rob and Michelle weren't just any couple. They were cautious, security conscious. You don't build a life in Brentwood, surrounded by power players, paparazzi, and paranoia, without being careful. So for Michelle to feel unsafe in her own home, that wasn't normal. It was specific. It was a signal. Another entry, dated just days before the murders, confirms this. Romy isn't sleeping. She's worried about Nick. I'm worried about her. She thinks we're being watched. Now that opens an entirely new thread. Was the Reiner family being surveilled? Stalked? Or was Romy simply reacting to the same growing paranoia her mother felt? Because just 2 pages later, Michelle writes this. "The camera system glitched again. Same zone. Back garden. That's the 3rd time this month. Same zone. Back garden. The exact spot where the killer is believed to have exited. The place Romy claimed to see someone flee toward. The corner where a security blind spot may have been exploited." Michelle's notes were precise. Not panicked, but deliberate. It was as if she was documenting breadcrumbs for someone, anyone, who might find them later. And then, one final chilling passage. It's just 3 lines, and it appears to be written in haste. "I told Rob. He brushed it off. Said I was spiraling. But I saw the eyes again. And this time, they didn't blink." That last sentence. It's metaphorical. Maybe. But it also paints a terrifying image. An image of someone watching, staring, unrelenting. Now, here's where the contradiction comes in. Friends of Michelle describe her as level-headed, grounded, not prone to dramatics. She was the glue, one longtime friend told Vanity Fair. The protector, the stabilizer. So these journal entries feel jarring. Was she slipping into paranoia? Or was she seeing something no one else wanted to admit? Let's talk about Nick again, briefly. Because Michelle does reference him often, she speaks of his struggles with empathy, his roller coaster moods, his desire to be seen but also to disappear. One entry even describes an argument they had about a trust fund. Nick apparently wanted early access. Michelle wrote, "He got loud, said he'd earned it. I told him money won't fix a broken compass." But, and this is key, nowhere in the journal does Michelle express fear of Nick. Concern? Yes. Love? Always. But fear? No. The fear is reserved for someone else. Someone around Nick. Someone Michelle perceived as dangerous. And that brings us to the question, could it be Romy? Unlikely. Despite the recent twist in Romy's timeline, Michelle only expresses maternal concern for her. She praises Romy's artistic instincts, mentions her vulnerability, says she's too empathetic for a family like ours. So who's left? A few names come up in Michelle's entries. Rarely, but notably, Jake, Rob's half-brother. The estranged one. The one Rob reportedly cut off financially after a falling out. Laura, a family confidant whose role is never fully explained. Some say she was a spiritual advisor. Others claim she was once Rob's personal assistant. MT. These initials appear several times, always in vague ways. MT called again. Or Romy says MT makes her uncomfortable. To this day, no one has confirmed who MT is, but those entries fuel speculation. Could this be the person who stood behind Nick? Was MT manipulating things from the shadows? Feeding paranoia? Using Nick's vulnerability? We can't say for certain, but we do know this. The journal reveals a pattern, a shift, an increasing dread that crescendoed into that final night. And Michelle felt it. She knew something was coming. Here's what's eerie. The final entry is incomplete. The handwriting changes, becomes rushed. It starts, "I think someone's in the yard again." Rob says it's the gardener, but it's too late. No one comes this late. And that's it. No ending, no signature, just a ripped pen stroke and a smeared corner. The page was found stained, possibly with wine, possibly with blood. We may never know, but it stopped mid-sentence, mid-thought, like the author was interrupted, possibly forever. So here we are. Michelle's journal reads like a premonition, a map of worry, a blueprint of fear, and maybe a roadmap to the killer. And yet, despite its warnings, despite the tension, despite the surveillance glitches, no one listened. Not even Rob. Not in time. Which begs the question, if someone had believed her, just once, would Rob and Michelle still be alive today? Because Michelle left behind more than memories. She left behind clues. And now, investigators are following one of those clues, straight to the blueprint of the estate. To the doors. To the cameras. To the corners of the house built to be impenetrable. But still, someone got in. And next, we walk through it, room by room, step by step, minute by chilling minute. Because the layout of the Reiner estate may hold the answer no one saw coming. How does someone enter a $13.5 million estate with motion sensors, guards, and reinforced gates, stab 2 people to death, and vanish into thin air? It's not just a question of motive anymore. It's a question of architecture. Because the Reiner estate wasn't just a house. It was a fortress. Or, at least it should have been. And yet someone broke through. Not with brute force. Not with a battering ram. But with silence, precision, knowledge. They knew exactly where to walk. Exactly which doors to avoid. And most importantly, exactly what cameras wouldn't catch them. Let's walk through the scene. From the outside, the Brentwood estate is cinematic. Mediterranean stone, towering palms, 2 stories of sprawling windows, winding staircases, wraparound balconies, and state-of-the-art security. But there's something you don't see in the photos. The blind spots. Investigators mapped out the full layout after the murders, room by room. Their floor plan reveals something shocking. There are 4 key zones where security failed. Not because of broken tech. Not because of power outages. But because of design flaws only someone intimately familiar with the estate would know. Let's break those zones down. Zone 1. The side gate, the gardener's entrance. This is where it starts. On the east side of the property, shielded by 12-foot hedges and rarely used except by landscapers and maintenance staff, there's a slim iron gate. From the street, it's invisible. Even standing on the property, you'd miss it if you weren't looking. Michelle's journal warned about this spot. I told Rob it's never locked properly. He shrugged. Investigators later discovered the gate was unlatched the night of the murders. The lock wasn't broken. The keypad wasn't tampered with. It was opened from the inside. Let that sink in. Someone either opened it for the killer, or the killer had access and permission at some point. Zone 2. The garden path and security blind spot. After the side gate, a narrow stone path winds behind the pool house and curves around to the rear of the home. This path is not covered by motion sensors. Why? Because it's part of a landscaping zone, coded as inactive to prevent false alerts when gardeners move through during scheduled hours. But the killer didn't arrive during scheduled hours. They arrived in the dead zone, between 4:30 p.m. and 5 p.m., the exact time Michelle was likely still alive. Now, this path leads to the glass garden doors, which open directly into the kitchen. And here's where it gets disturbing. The latch on one of those doors was disabled. Not broken, disabled. The magnetic sensor had been popped out of alignment, just slightly. Enough to prevent it from sending an alert to the system if the door was opened. Whoever did that knew the system. A break-in from a stranger would have tripped alarms. This didn't. This was surgical. Zone 3, the hallway, and the bloody smear. Once inside the kitchen, the killer could move freely. And that's exactly what they did. The hallway where Romy claimed to see a shadow? It's a long corridor connecting the kitchen to the main foyer and stairs. That hallway is the only interior zone with a glitchy motion detector. It had been flagged in a service report 6 months earlier. Never repaired. Michelle made a note of it in her journal. Sensor still blinking. Tech guy says not to worry. But she should have worried. Because that hallway is also where the bloody smear was found. Investigators believe the killer moved through this corridor with the weapon, pressed against the wall, maybe with a gloved hand, maybe while dragging something. There were no other prints, just that one faint smear, wiped down after, but not perfectly, almost as if someone wanted to partially clean up, to confuse, to suggest sloppiness while hiding the truth. Zone 4, the stairwell, and Rob Reiner's final moments. This is where things turn violent. Rob's body was found at the base of the stairs, face down, blood pooled across the marble, a single deep wound to the chest, and defensive cuts on his forearm, which means he saw it coming. Michelle, by contrast, was found closer to the kitchen. So what happened? One theory, Michelle was attacked first. She may have been cooking, one of her favorite rituals, according to Romy. Rob, hearing the struggle, came downstairs, surprised the attacker, fought back, but the attacker was ready. You don't get clean wounds like that, deep, targeted, unless you know what you're doing. And here's where things get even creepier. In the stairwell, a single overhead camera should have captured the killer's movement. But it didn't. Why? Because it was unplugged. Not broken. Unplugged. The cable had been detached from the DVR system. No one in the family admitted to touching it. The system logs show it went offline at 4:29 p.m. The murders occurred shortly after. An exit without a trace. Now let's look at how the killer got out. There's no sign of forced exit. No back door left ajar. No footprints in the garden. No blood trail beyond the interior. But here's what was found. A faint disturbance in the gravel near the side path. One small piece of black wool snagged on a nail by the side gate. A fingerprint, partial, gloved, on the inside of the glass kitchen door. And one other thing. The scent trail picked up by a cadaver dog led not out the front gate, but toward the north garden. That's where a secondary exit connects the estate to a back alley, used by garbage trucks and delivery vans. And here's the chilling part. There's no security camera on that side. The alley isn't monitored. And you know who helped design that renovation? Nick Reiner. During the 2020 lockdown, Rob and Nick reportedly worked on estate upgrades, landscaping, rerouting gates, installing hidden lighting. Nick even posted on Instagram at the time, turning Dad's place into Fort Knox. But sexy. He knew every angle of that estate, every flaw, every shadow. So even if Nick didn't hold the knife, Even if he didn't strike the blow, he may have created the perfect blueprint for someone who did. And maybe someone took advantage of that. Who could have known this layout? This is the million-dollar question. Because whoever did this didn't improvise. They moved through the house with intent. They knew when not to trigger sensors, which cameras to avoid, which doors to enter and exit. We're not talking about a random intruder. This was someone with deep, inside knowledge. Possibilities? A former housekeeper, a disgruntled contractor, a family friend with access, or someone who lived there. Nick, Romy, someone close to them. Even Michelle hinted at this in her journal. It feels like the house is no longer ours. Like someone else knows its rhythm. Rhythm, that's the word that chills. Because it implies more than knowledge. It implies intimacy. Someone who could move through the house like a ghost. Without fear, without urgency, because they belong there. And the scariest part? The killer may have never left the property until well after police arrived. One theory, floated by a forensic profiler, suggests the attacker hid for hours, possibly in the basement storage, or in the attic above the guest house. When asked if this was plausible, one detective didn't hesitate. It wouldn't be the first time a killer hid in plain sight. Let that sink in. Romy, Nick, first responders, all combing the estate, calling out names, searching for answers. While the killer may have been just feet above their heads, holding their breath in silence. So what does this mean? It means the layout of the house, the very thing that should have protected Rob and Michelle, was used against them. It means someone knew the blueprint, used it, exploited it. And when you understand the house, you understand the crime. Because this wasn't just murder. It was surgical betrayal. A kill executed in a rhythm only a Reiner would understand. But one part of the house holds a clue yet unexplored. A place few people ever went. A place Romy mentioned only once. A place something was recently dug up. And what police found buried behind the garden shed might just blow this case wide open. What if the killer wasn't a stranger, or even an outsider? What if the person responsible for Rob and Michelle Reiner's deaths was welcomed into the family long ago, but never truly belonged? What if this wasn't just a murder, but a long, slow betrayal that started with a smile and ended with 2 corpses and a cover-up? Because behind the walls of that Brentwood estate were more than cameras and corridors. There were secrets, and some of them weren't buried deep enough. Let's start with what was found behind the garden shed. The Reiners' property had been swept by law enforcement multiple times, but it wasn't until a cadaver dog paused near the north side of the yard, just past the vegetable beds, that officers noticed a patch of disturbed soil. At first, it looked like someone had simply moved a few paving stones, but underneath, a hollowed-out space, roughly the size of a shoebox, and inside that space, a burned envelope, the charred remains of photographs. A small, plastic USB drive, partially melted, and one other item, a gold pendant necklace, cracked and stained with something later confirmed to be blood. The DNA matched Michelle, but the necklace didn't belong to her. It belonged to Romy. She had posted photos wearing it on her Instagram 2 years ago with the caption, "Mom's birthday gift," never taking it off. So what was it doing buried in the dirt? Why was it burned, along with family photographs? Why was it hidden? And more importantly, who put it there? Romy said she hadn't seen the necklace in over a year, that she lost it during a beach trip, that she had no idea how it ended up in the ground behind the shed. But here's where things twist. According to one of the Reiners' former nannies, who worked in the household when Romy and Nick were children, the shed was more than just a garden tool room. It was Nick's hideout, a place where he'd sneak away when he got in trouble, where he kept things he didn't want his parents to find, where, as the nanny put it, Nick played at being invisible. That statement, on its own, is chilling. But when police looked closer, they found traces of ash along the baseboard, fresh. Someone had tried to burn something and bury it. A cleanup job? A panic move? Or was this part of something bigger? The Reiner family tree, branches that twist. Let's look at the family from a broader view. We know the public story. Rob Reiner, beloved actor and director. Michelle, philanthropist and producer. A Hollywood power couple with 2 children, Romy and Nick. But behind that polished image were years of quiet dysfunction. Nick struggled publicly. His addiction battles. His mental health journey. His bitter fights with his father over direction, legacy, and money. Romy, meanwhile, always seemed to be the good one. But some friends say the pressure of being the golden child broke something inside her. She was always expected to shine, said one college friend. But that family didn't know how to handle soft people. They only respected loud ones. Then there's the estranged half-brother, Jake Reiner, Rob's son from a previous relationship, a man cut out of the inheritance years ago. There was an incident in 2018, never fully reported, where Jake allegedly showed up at a family event uninvited. He was escorted out, told never to come back. Since then, Jake's been off the grid. No verified address, no job anyone can confirm. But in the weeks before the murder, someone using Jake's name tried to access the estate's guest list for a charity event. He was denied. Was it him? Or someone pretending to be him? And does he have a motive? According to one family acquaintance, Jake once said, "The Reiner fortune is blood money, and they'll choke on it." No one took him seriously at the time. But after Rob and Michelle were found stabbed, suddenly, those words feel prophetic. Enter the outsiders, the inner circle of influence. Beyond family, there's another group investigators are focused on, the close friends orbiting the Reiners. Some names repeat across journals, texts, and social posts. Laura Penn, once Michelle's personal assistant, later her wellness coach. She reportedly grew close to both Romy and Nick in the final year. Romy described her in one message as the only person who listens to me. But Lara's past isn't as serene as her affirmations and yoga mantras. A private investigator discovered she was sued twice for financial misconduct while working for another celebrity family. In both cases, charges were dropped, but settlements were paid. Lara was also seen visiting the Reiner home days before the murder. She left around 9 p.m., according to a neighbor. Security logs do not show her name being checked in. That's a red flag. Another frequent visitor? Max Thurman, a tech consultant who helped with security systems on the estate. Here's what's suspicious. He had access to the entire blueprint. He knew the locations of every sensor, camera, and software update. He also had a brief romantic relationship with Romy, one that ended abruptly. She blocked his number. He reportedly threatened to ruin her family in a now-deleted DM. Police questioned him, but so far, no charges. Still, his fingerprints were found on a garden tool near the disturbed soil behind the shed. He claims he helped Nick with yard work a few months back. Convenient, right? And then there's MT. Remember the journal entries? The cryptic initials that kept showing up in Michelle's private writings? MT came by again. Romy says MT gives her a bad feeling. Nick is always quiet when MT is around. We still don't know who MT is. But there are whispers. A producer? A distant relative? A handler from one of Nick's rehab programs? Whoever they are, they're the ghost in this story. Always present, never seen. And when Romy was asked directly in a follow-up interview if MT had anything to do with what happened to her parents, she went silent for over a minute, then simply said, "I can't answer that. I really can't. The necklace, the USB drive, and the photos. Let's go back to the garden discovery. Why would someone bury photos? What were they of?" Investigators managed to partially recover 2 images from the charred remains. They appear to show Rob, Michelle, Nick, and Romy on the back patio. A 5th person, slightly blurred, standing in the corner of the frame. That 5th person's face was deliberately scratched out. As for the USB drive, it's currently undergoing data restoration. But initial scans suggest it may contain surveillance footage or some kind of home recording. Was someone being filmed? Was blackmail involved? Was this whole thing a setup gone wrong? If that drive holds what they think it does, it could expose everything. But the fire damaged much of it, and time is running out. A family imploding from within. As investigators dig deeper, they're starting to believe this wasn't just a crime of passion. It was a long simmering plan. A house full of resentment, power struggles, secrets traded like currency, and someone, somewhere, finally said, "Enough." So who? Was it Nick? Was it Romy? Was it someone none of us have looked at closely enough? Because one more secret just surfaced. A text exchange between Rob and Michelle, dated 5 days before the murder. Rob wrote, "I'm starting to think we brought the wrong people into our lives." Michelle replied, "We let them too close. Now it's too late." What did she mean? Who did she mean? Those words now echo like prophecy, because sometimes the people you let in are the ones who burn everything down from the inside. And next, We'll take a closer look at the unseen footage. The one clip that wasn't meant to survive. The camera that shouldn't have been rolling. The frame that may show exactly who left the house before Romy ever called 911. And what they were holding changed the case forever. What if the camera that wasn't supposed to be on was? What if a single glitch in the Reiner estate's security system, an error most people would overlook, captured the moment that cracks this entire case open? Because that's exactly what's happened. Buried in hours of corrupted data, frozen timestamps, and motionless hallway clips, was one unassuming fragment of surveillance. And it might be the most damning piece of evidence yet. We're talking about the unseen footage. Footage that was never listed in the original police report. Footage that didn't even exist in the first round of backups. Footage that Romy never knew existed. And what it shows: someone leaving the main house. Someone moving fast. And someone holding something that would make every investigator freeze. Let's break this down. The dead camera that wasn't. The camera in question was located on the northeast eave of the Reiner home, facing the service path, the narrow walkway between the garden shed and the side exit gate. It's not a camera most would even know existed. It was installed in 2021 after an attempted break-in on a nearby property. Rob had insisted on it. Ironically, Michelle thought it was overkill. According to records, the camera had been offline for months. Its connection to the main DVR system was listed as inactive on the most recent maintenance report. So when detectives reviewed footage from the night of the murder, they skipped it. Why would they check a dead camera? But here's what they missed. The camera wasn't dead. Its hardwired connection was severed, sure, but the internal SD card kept recording. It had been set to store footage locally as a backup. Something only the technician who installed it would know. And guess who that technician was? Max Thurman. The same Max who dated Romy. The same Max whose fingerprints were found on a garden tool. The same Max who knew every inch of the Reiner security layout. Investigators didn't even find the SD card at first. It was located inside a waterproof junction box, buried behind drywall and power relays in the attic. But once recovered and decrypted, it showed what no one expected. A 42-second clip, time-stamped 5:46 p.m., exactly 7 minutes before Romy placed her 911 call. What the footage shows: the clip begins quietly, a faint rustle of leaves, the gentle hum of the garden lights flickering on as dusk settles. Then, movement. A figure emerges from the side of the house. Not sprinting, not stumbling, but walking fast, controlled, deliberate. The person is dressed entirely in black. Long sleeves, gloves, a hood pulled low. The camera's quality isn't cinematic. It's grainy, analog, unpolished. But enough detail is there. The figure is tall, roughly 6 feet 1 inch. Broad shoulders, left-handed, based on how they carry an object in their left hand. And that object? At first glance, it looks like a small duffel bag. But when the figure adjusts their grip, something glints, metallic. For a single frame, the light catches the outline of a knife blade. It's long, curved, almost ceremonial in shape. Not a kitchen knife, not a standard household blade, a weapon. And the figure is carrying it casually, confidently, as they disappear off camera toward the side gate. Seconds later, a sensor light flicks off. Then nothing. The clip ends. Why it matters? This footage changes everything. Until now, the timeline had one consistent narrative. Romy found the bodies. Nick was arrested on circumstantial evidence. Everyone assumed the killer had already fled, unseen. But now we know. The killer was still in the house minutes before Romy arrived. And they left carrying what appears to be the murder weapon. Which means Romy's confession about seeing a shadow wasn't a hallucination. She really did see someone. But she lied about it. She said she panicked, didn't know what she saw. But if she passed this person in the side yard, if they walked by that exact path, there's no way she didn't see the weapon. And if she saw it, why didn't she say it? Let that question linger. Identifying the figure. The obvious next step was to try and identify the person in the footage. But it's not easy. The killer is fully covered, face obscured. But forensic image analysts have begun enhancing the clip frame by frame. Here's what they've determined. Height, between 6 feet 0 inches and 6 feet 2 inches. Gait, smooth, upright stride, possibly athletic. Build, lean to medium. Dominant hand, left, based on carry. Distinguishing movement, slight limp on the right foot, subtle but consistent. And here's where it gets wild. One person fits that profile. Jake Reiner, Rob's estranged son, the one who hadn't been seen publicly in nearly a year, the one who left Hollywood behind, the one who, according to Romy, had unfinished business. Jake has never been ruled out because he's never been fully investigated. His name isn't on any official report. He wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the estate. But guess what? A new witness, a local delivery driver, has just come forward. He claims he saw a man resembling Jake leaving the alley behind the Reiner property around 5:50 p.m. Said the man looked sweaty, wide-eyed, like he'd seen something terrible. Asked why he didn't report it? I didn't want to get involved. Not with a family like that. But now he's talking. And Jake's name is back in the mix. Why was the footage hidden? This is the haunting part. The camera wasn't broken. The footage wasn't corrupted. It was just buried. Which raises a terrifying possibility. Did someone know the footage existed and try to keep it hidden? Let's go back to Max. He's the only one who set up that backup SD feature. He's the only one who knew that junction box was in the attic. When asked directly if he'd ever returned to the property after the install, Max hesitated. He said he might have stopped by once to update firmware. There's no record of that visit. And when the police searched his apartment, guess what they found? A burner phone. Same model, same provider, same serial batch as the one that texted Nick the night of the murder. You okay? It's circumstantial, but it's piling up. What was Max hiding? Who was he protecting? Or was he part of something darker? The uncomfortable truth about Romy. Let's return to Romy. She told investigators she didn't remember much from that walk through the garden, that her vision blurred, that adrenaline took over. But the footage proves otherwise. She walked right past the spot the killer had just exited, less than 2 minutes later. That's not enough time for sense to fade, for tension to lift, for the